Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Blue Devil Beat. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, alongside my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you on this snowy Sunday?
Cold, man. It's cold out there.
Yeah, it is cold out there. It's snowing this week and last week, which is why we did not record last episode. So sorry we've been off for a couple weeks. But we're back this week, gonna recap some of the men's basketball and women's basketball that's been happening recently. And we're in Rivalry week. This is Rivalry
Mhm.
Challenge against the Daily Tar Heels. So later in the episode, we'll bring on Matthew Maynard, sports editor over at the DTH, to preview that game and talk a little bit about our Rivalry Challenge that we do every year against them. And then we're also going to give a little bit of a rundown of sports that have been happening. Our spring sports previews are going to be next week and the week after. We're going to be talking about the lacrosses, the baseballs, softballs, all that good stuff. We talked a little tennis last week. We'll talk some golf today.
Mhm.
Get it all for you on Blue Devil Beat. First, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise brought to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch. Okay, so in the past couple weeks that we've been gone, Duke has remained undefeated in ACC play for the men's basketball front. 3 games, 2 at home, 1 starting out defeating Wake Forest after a week off, 90-69, and then following that up a couple days later on Monday with an 83-52 win against Louisville, arguably the best conference win of the year. Not arguably, probably that was the best conference win of the year. One of the best all-around performances from Duke. We were there covering, so we'll fully break down that win. And then just yesterday, defeating Virginia Tech 72-58 in a pesky place to play, always up there in Blacksburg. So a solid win for the Blue Devils there. So we'll talk about all 3 of those. Let's start with the Louisville matchup, because we were there, and that was just so indicative of how the Blue Devils have been improving over this late in ACC play. For a team that's averaging 80 plus points per game, Duke holding them to 52. What worked well for Duke there, and were you surprised by the outcome? Because I certainly was.
Yeah, I think on our beats picks, I had us winning by 2, Duke winning by 2 at home.
Yeah.
It was not a 2-point game. It was not even close to that. I thought the defense obviously was spectacular. I think Cameron Boozer has really come along on that end. I wouldn't say he's an excellent defender at this point, but he does lead the team in steals, and I think he's become a lot more active on that end of the floor, which has given Duke an opportunity to really shore up things on defense. Louisville with Michael Brown has a lot of thoughts that he might have a big game. He missed the first matchup for the Cardinals, and then he had Kale Foster and Caden Boozer did an excellent job on him. He made 1 shot. It was like one
Yeah.
for he's
He
1
was
for
1 for
13.
13.
The student section was letting him hear it, calling him overrated, chanting "O" for whatever he was at him at all times. Thought he forced some shots, trying to get Louisville back in the game, but none of their guys really had a great night shooting. Conwell had a pretty good night, but they to live with that with McNeely and Michael Brown locked down. So that was a really impressive game. Nick Aminia, obviously, you'll talk about that. I'm sure he had a big night coming out party, perhaps. So really impressive win for Duke.
Yeah, and on the defensive end, with what Michael Brown does, you have those 3 guards that can all shoot the lights out of the ball. The spacing is kind of a nightmare for any defense, but I thought Duke did a phenomenal job containing. Isaac McNeely runs off screen so much, and I thought Isaiah Evans stayed with him. Isaac McNeely only took a couple shots the whole game, only made 2 threes, one with Isaiah guarding him, one when Isaiah was on the bench. And so just phenomenal job from Evans, because on the offensive end, he's the one who's also running around screen. So he's conditionally already tired on offense, and having to come back and do that against McNeely, I thought was fantastic. There was that stretch there in the first half, the nearly 8-minute scoring drought that I really think set the tone. And that was not just with the starters. That was with Caden Boozer, Nick Homenia, some others guarding these elite guard players out of Louisville. And they went on that drought. And man, if Duke was a little bit better offensively, they would have blown up the game right there. But in the second half, Duke forced Louisville into another drought. So I thought it was fantastic. I thought the communication was good. Shire talks about how now on defense, they're switching less because they have a little bit worse personnel, like Cameron Boozer and Pat Ngongba probably aren't the best switching on to guys like Conwell and McNeely. But now what they're doing is hedging screens, and communication is so important on that, because the guards have to come over, the big men have to rotate, and the backside's usually wide open. So I thought the communication was excellent. And it's a cool adjustment to see Shire do that with his team, going from predominantly switching, especially a lot with Lasher's group in early this year, to kind of knowing your personnel and knowing That might not be the best. Okay, flipping to the offensive end, 83 points, again, solid from Duke. That helps with the defensive effort. Cam Boozer, 19 points. That was much more balanced. What did you see from some of those supporting guys around Boozer for Duke's offensive performance?
Yeah, I thought it was balanced. I think you mentioned it wasn't the best offensive showing. I think during that stretch where Louisville had the 8 minutes, they didn't score. Duke had one basket made, so it wasn't like they were blowing them out at that point. But yeah, I thought coming out of halftime, I thought it looked much better on offense. I think Pat had 3 buckets on the first 3 possessions. They were feeding him. He had that one huge lob over Frew that got the crowd really excited. But yeah, I thought they spread the rock well. They didn't shoot great from three. Isaiah was 2 for 8. Cam was 1 for 4, and then Pat and Dame were 0 for 3 combined. But Nick coming off the bench was a big spacing addition there. He was 3 for 4 from beyond the arc, and then I thought Caden did a good job too, just getting in the lane and making some things happen at the rim. So yeah, it was good. I mean, it's not the best offensive showing, but it was good enough. And when your defense plays that good, you don't need that much. So
Yeah, agreed. And I thought I talk about this a lot with this team, but just the effort they play with, especially in the offensive glass. There was one play that just sticks in my mind. Sananda Frew had a rebound. Caleb Foster came down and stripped it from him, got the rebound. The ball finds its way to Hemeni in the corner for 3. He knocks it down. Shire gives like double fist pumps because Pat Kelsey has to call a timeout. Just the offensive glass, Duke had 15 offensive rebounds, and even when you're not shooting the ball that well, you want to get second chances. Malik Brown with 5. He's a master at not giving up on the play and
Yeah.
stealing possessions for Duke. I thought Foster did a good job with that too. So around all of them, the offensive rebounding effort was great. And same on defense, deflections galore.
yeah, I mean the paint. It seems a common theme at this point in the ACC, at least, that the paint Duke dominates. They had 42 points in the paint compared to Louisville had 10.
Jeez.
And it might be different coming up this week with North Carolina because obviously Wilson and Vase are a little bit different of a beast than what Louisville has, but I think it's kind of been a theme at this point. Even against the top front courts in the country, Duke's really held its own in the paint on offense.
Yeah, they've really dominated that aspect. And it's interesting, even with this stretch where Duke is probably playing its best basketball of the season, the 3-point numbers are actually a little bit down from what they were earlier. And so that's indicative of how well they're playing both in the paint and getting second chances and on defense, which moves us to the Virginia Tech game, 72-58. Virginia Tech, another team, I believe, averaging 80 around that area. So holding them to 58, obviously, they didn't have their best shooting day at all, but neither did Duke, 5 for 21 from 3. But it was one of those grinding out efforts. Virginia Tech made a couple surges there, but I thought Duke did a good job preventing the game of runs from getting too out of hand there in Blacksburg.
Yeah, I think, Duke's at its best when it realizes that it can just usually pound the ball in the paint and get a bucket against any team. Cam Boozer was, ruthlessly efficient yesterday. He was 9 for 12 from the field, 2 for 3 from 3, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. Teams don't have an answer for him. No team really does. So we've seen that so far this season. And so, Virginia Tech didn't either. They just kind of pounded it down low when they needed a couple buckets, and I thought it went really well. But I thought the Hokies, had some guys that played pretty well, especially Amani Hansberry. He really impressed me from beyond the arc. He's 4 for 5. The rest of the team had, 3 combined? So he did a lot of the heavy lifting there for them. I thought he played really well, but you just don't have the personnel, I think, to keep up with the Blue Devils. Even with the packed house at Cassell, it was a good crowd there. And, it was another good win, I think. Virginia Tech was fighting for a tournament berth. I think they're right on the bubble there, and Duke did well to silence that effort.
Yeah, and Avdalis, who's the Greek player for Virginia Tech, did not have his best game at all. He looked in his head kind of uncomfortable throughout the contest, but that's also credit to Duke's defense. I thought Ben Hammond, another Virginia Tech guard, was great in terms of hustle plays. He got, some steals and deflections and offensive rebounds, and he was flying all over the floor and gave his team some extra chances and fought well. You mentioned Hansberry. But look, for Duke, the 3-point shooting, yes, it might become a problem later down the stretch if Isaiah Evans is continuing to shoot at lower volume numbers. He's doing well finding ways to impact the game even when he's not shooting. But if teams start to double cam and he skips it to Dame or Isaiah, somebody's got to make those shots, I'm not saying it won't come. Hemeni made a few against Louisville. Caleb Foster's been phenomenal from deep for most of the year. So we'll see, but that is something to watch. But I do just want to say, look, winning is hard in the ACC. You're seeing these teams throughout the country losing tough games on the road. Winning on the road anywhere is difficult, no matter the conference opponent you're playing. And so I think it's important to note, 20-1 is spectacular, especially adding that on to last year's record. Winning is hard, and Duke's doing it. This year's a little bit of an anomaly in terms of the top teams winning so many games, but still very impressive that Duke continues to do this week in, week out. Okay. Anything else from the men's basketball front? We'll talk with Matthew about the UNC game, which should be exciting. Like you mentioned, the front court battle will be fun.
No, I just think obviously Boston College is Tuesday. That's
Yes.
the next game. Obviously not a ACC top dog, but a chance for a team that is desperately looking for a big win. They played Virginia really
I was
close
gonna say.
this weekend, the same day that Duke was playing in Blacksburg. So I think they've obviously been looking for a signature win. They haven't had a lot go right for them, so it'd be a
Mhm.
big opportunity for the Eagles, and Duke might be looking forward to the game against Tar Heels. So it's a big spot there Tuesday.
Yeah. Why don't we do a stock up, stock down of the national landscape of college basketball? We usually do this within the ACC, but why don't we expand it today?
Yeah. I'll start. Stock up is Central Florida, the Knights. Former Duke legend Johnny Dawkins and his squad. If Duke would that game would have counted the exhibition, it's another top win for Duke. There, they just knocked off Texas Tech this weekend, who obviously is Duke's lone blemish on the season. They're 17-4. I wouldn't say they have the most resources they've given Coach Dawkins either, and they've done a really good job with what they have. The Big 12 is obviously a really hard place to play. They've lost to, I think, Arizona, Kansas, and maybe Oklahoma State, but they've lost they lost to Arizona and Iowa State. So two of
Yeah.
that's probably the two best teams in the conference, and then one more questionable loss. But they've done a really good job to tread water in that conference. They're in the top quadrant, and tracking towards the tournament at this point if they keep playing. And then my stock down is Purdue. It's a little weird because they just had a 20-point win today as we're recording this, but they have lost 3 of their last 4 games, and they beat Maryland, who's been really struggling this year anyways. They lost to UCLA, they lost to Indiana, and they lost to, can't even think about it, a team that was actually one of the actually good teams in the Big Ten. But yeah, they haven't, I think they're fine. They're 8th in KenPom, but kind of been a tough stretch for them in conference play. The Big Ten obviously has a lot of really good teams this year, like Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois. So it's just been kind of tough sledding, but I'm sure they have plenty of veterans. They'll figure it out. But this week so far, just stock down for them.
Yeah, nice. For me, I'm going to go stock up Kansas, who obviously yesterday had a phenomenal win against BYU, but has capped off a 5-game winning streak for the Jayhawks that started at a home win against Iowa State with a 21-point win there. And look, I mean, it's will he or won't he play whenever Darren Peterson's out there, but he was out there yesterday and he certainly made an impact. His 3-level scoring is phenomenal, and obviously I won't go on about his potential and his talent because it's there. Everyone knows it. It's just a matter of whether he's going to play or not. But he's been playing the month of January, and Kansas has been playing better when he's in the lineup. And now that they have the balance, they have the inside presence with Badunga and Bryson Tiller. If they can get continued guard play around Peterson and scoring, like guys like Trey White, Melvin Council Jr., Rosario, other guys like that can shoot the ball. If they can do that, this is a scary offensive team. And I think Kansas is going to make a run in a tough Big 12 conference, but they're a team that can score some points. It's a matter of can they lock in on the defensive end of the ball. But scoring 90 against BYU is a significant feat for the Jayhawks. Stock down, I was going back and forth with this within the ACC. I'm actually going to go with SMU because, they've had some early in the ACC play, they didn't have, too crazy of a resume, but they kept, winning solidly, and people were like, okay, this team might be for real, especially after the solid win against UNC. Traveled to Clemson, lost to Duke in a competitive game without Boobie Miller, but they've, had some tough sledding of late, losing to Virginia, losing to Louisville in a game where they were leading by a lot in that first half. They're not a bad team, but they need some marquee wins if they're going to, have a significant seeding or make the tournament, because they have not just had that quality win yet for Andy Enfeld's group. And I think this was a team that wanted to have that. They're beating the teams that they're supposed to beat, but you got to beat one of those where you have the chance. They've had Virginia, they've had Louisville. So stock down, maybe stock holding until the Louisville matchup in a couple weeks, see if they can get a big one there. But that's where I'm at. Let's see what else. Okay, let's move on to women's basketball, because it's been, keep on keeping on for Duke women's basketball. We're recording this right after a dominating win against Wake Forest. Duke demolished the Demon Deacons and held the Wake Forest to the lowest opposing total first half by an ACC opponent.
10 points.
Yeah. Wake Forest scored 10 points and a half, the lowest Duke has ever given up to an ACC opponent. I guess that's the right way to say it. Wake Forest scored 34 in the second half, too, which I'm sure Carol Lawson is not very happy about. But another dominant win, and Duke has won 13 games in a row, which is phenomenal, with only 7, sometimes 8 rotation players.
Yeah.
Beating Miami on the road. Look, Riley Nelson is coming into her own. Toby Fournier, Ashlyn Jackson. This team is hooping, man. It's been fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're 13-game win streak. It's the second longest in the conference, right behind Louisville, who they will play on Thursday. Something's got to give there. Both 11-0 in conference play. But yeah, it's been really impressive. I mean, they're just kind of mauling the teams that come to town usually. Yeah, ACC. I mean, I think outside and those two teams kind of seems like the race at this point. North Carolina and NC State haven't had the season that people expected, and it's definitely not Notre Dame, who's now down to 5-5. But yeah, I think it's a pretty two-horse race. Who would have thought? 3-6 a couple weeks ago, and here they are.
Now.
But yeah, I mean, huge game on Thursday for Carol Lawson and company.
Yeah, quick little preview of that one. And you mentioned North Carolina, NC State. Duke is also going to play them coming up in the next couple weeks. NC State is playing its best basketball of the season now, too. So that'll be fun. Contest. Duke plays North Carolina twice. NC State also just once. But Louisville coming in, they're a balanced team. They have, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6 players averaging more than 8 points a game. I mean, Tajiana Roberts, Amani Berry, their guards are talented, very, very well coached with Jeff Walls. This is a team that's always near the top of the league. But I think for Duke, the challenge is going to be Louisville plays a lot of players. They're deep. Duke is not. Is Tyna Mare going to get tired? Ashlyn Jackson, those guards, when you're facing that constant defensive pressure and having to guard some of the best guards in the ACC. That's my biggest question, honestly, because that's kind of what plagued Duke earlier in the season. But now, are some of the reserve guards, can they step up enough to not have a significant drop-off when Duke goes to the bench? Because, look, Duke's only going to play 7, maybe 8 players. I don't know if Jaden Donovan's going to be cleared by then. We haven't heard any indication that she would be. And with Emily Skinner redshirting, this team is very, very thin. So we'll see. But, they've been playing well 13 in a row. Louisville's at 14 in a row. Yeah. So that'll be a fun one in the KFC Yum Center. I'm sure it's going to be packed.
Yeah.
Excited for that one. Okay, let's talk about some other sports around the league or around the campus. Yeah, the campus for Duke. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's been happening so far?
Yeah, so it was kind of a little bit of a slower period, but there has been teams are starting to get back into the full swing of things now that spring sports are getting started. We had women's golf. They had a big week down in Jacksonville at the CBEST Intercollegiate. They were one stroke off of winning. They were second, one stroke behind Florida at 27 under. They had a freshman, Rian Maliksi, I think is how you say it. She's a freshman. She won her first ever collegiate title. She was first place there at the tournament, so really good start for women's golf. Track and field went up to Liberty, won 5 different events, the 60-meter, 200-meter, heptathlon, long jump, and pole vault. So the field events, they really got after it. Swim and dive, tough loss to Tennessee this week. First, both men's and women's lost to the Volunteers there on the road. Women's tennis had a thrilling match against Kentucky. They won at home 4-2. And then wrestling, another rough for wrestling. But I will say, I was at the wrestling match this week. They lost to Virginia, which, it's not great to lose. But it was a big crowd. It was a tenting attendance event. They had a lot of fans there. It was a fun atmosphere in Cameron. Last year it was in Card for the tenting event, so it was a fun time. Not the best for wrestling. They're not great. They have a couple guys, Aiden Wallace, Connor Barkett, both won. Their matches really good, but as a team, they're just struggling, which is just all right.
Had a decent non-con for the wrestling.
Yeah, ACC is just tough conference. I think UVA is usually the second worst, so it's not good to lose to them by 18, but it's all right. And then we got men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse starting up this week, and then baseball and softball. Obviously, softball, I think, is the spring sport people are most expectations for, I guess.
Sure.
Usually the best last couple of years. So should be a fun season all around coming up.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, we'll preview those with the beats in the next coming weeks. Also just mentioned, unfortunately, men's tennis has gone final against Kentucky. That's 2 losses for Ramsey Smith's squad. 2 tough road matches against Kentucky and Illinois, but they will look to bounce back this weekend. All right, we're going to talk to Matthew after this to preview the Duke UNC game and talk some Cron DTH rivalry challenge.
Yes, sir.
Everybody, welcome back to Blue Devil Beat. We're super excited to be joined here by 3 writers from the Daily Tar Heel. We have Matthew Maynard, who's the sports editor who came on last year, and then 2 first-time guests, Brian DeGuano, the assistant sports editor, and Beckett Brantley, who's also an assistant sports editor over at the Daily Tar Heel. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it and excited to be here.
Awesome. So, Matthew, I'll start off with you to preview this matchup. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Duke UNC, this Saturday, the first game here is going to be over in Chapel Hill. Talk to us a little bit about the season so far for North Carolina. The Tar Heels currently at 17-4, sixth in the league. Had a great start to the year. A little bit of a couple hiccups in ACC play, but what is the state of the team right now? Would you say for the Tar Heels?
Yeah, I think they're in pretty good shape considering that West Coast slide. 2 losses to Stanford and Cal back to back was pretty brutal for them, especially like you said, the way that they started the non-conference slate off and entered ACC play at 12-1. Um, it's kind of exactly what you were looking for if you're Hubert Davis, kind of fighting for your job in a sense, because it's been up and down. But the win over Virginia seemed like they might have turned a page a little bit and followed it up with the win against Georgia Tech, which Georgia Tech's not anything to write home about, but a win's a win going down to Atlanta. So I think right now they're in a much better position than they were just 2 weeks ago. The losses to SMU, Cal, and Stanford were really eye-opening in terms of the defense, and especially the three-point defense. But I think they can shore that up a little bit, and they kind of have headed into the Duke game.
Yeah. Beckett, let's talk about a little bit more about that UVA game. Kind of what did you see from the Tar Heels in that game? Obviously, it was a huge win in Charlottesville for Hubert Davis and company.
Yeah, obviously the comeback was the big thing. I think this may sound really obvious, but something that stands out about this team is like you can tell when they remember that they are basketball players and they can shoot the ball. Like in the first half, they just weren't hitting anything, and I think, well, they were fine from 3 point in the first half, as they were in the second half, but just like some of those shots around the rim were going in the second, and then it was hard to write about the comeback without talking about Jaron Stevenson because that's what Brian wrote about. But he was such a huge factor, and when he has played well this season, they've been really good.
Yeah, for sure. And before this 2-game winning stretch, Matthew alluded to it, but the West Coast trip, North Carolina went an 0 there. Brian, I'll ask you about the defensive performance there. Obviously, Stanford Abuka Corey's a tough cover, one of the best scorers in the league and even the country, but, allowing Stanford to shoot 57% from three and Cal up there as well. What do you think went wrong defensively for North Carolina? Was it a chemistry, communication thing, or, missed assignments? What did you see in those 2 games?
Um, I think there was one thing that was in particular wrong, and I don't think maybe the national media doesn't understand this, but Caleb Wilson and Henry Rassard in those 2 games specifically were getting really beat on high ball screens.
Yeah.
They looked like they didn't know what to do. It was like miscommunication. Henry Rassard specifically had problems when he would hedge ball screens. He would like kind of chase those guards out. Corey and Miller, like he would chase those guards out. It looked like they had miscommunication issues. They really didn't look like they knew what they were doing. Caleb Wilson on the last 2 threes of the game specifically did not help, leading to wide open threes. I think I wrote about it. I think Caleb Wilson and Henry Rassard really have to step up defensively, specifically guarding high ball screens. I think in recent games, they've kind of pertained to drop coverage with Henry Rassard, so like they're not even hedging at all with Rassard. They're
Sure.
calling the guards to go over. I think that can pose issues a lot of times if you have good shooters. So I think that's particularly where UNC could be vulnerable. And if for opponents, I think just putting those 2 in high ball screens and kind of keeping them honest and like seeing if they have improved in that area is very important.
Funny you say that. Feels like Duke has the same struggles with the Cameron Boozer, Pat Gongva front court on defense. But yeah, good analysis.
Yeah,
there.
you mentioned obviously for all the defensive shortcomings, maybe Caleb Wilson's still one of the best freshmen in the country and one of the best players in the country. 20-point double-double on average this season. Beckett, kind of give us the scouting report on Wilson, what makes him so dynamic, and what makes him such a tough cover for the rest of the league and the country.
Yeah, don't know why I got cast as the biggest Wilson fan, but I guess I'll take it. I mean, yeah, obviously the defense is a struggle, but he's really athletic when he has the ball, or when he has the potential to have the ball. I think obviously the dunking, but just the confidence to take the shot from wherever his turnaround jumper mid-range has been a big part of the game because he's not the most physical guy, I'd say, under the basket. So his ability to turn around, 6, 8 feet away from the basket and take those points without having to drive in is really big. I think he could prove a little bit on those like layups. He's missed a few here and there. Again, not super physical into the basket, but yeah, those are some big things that make him a formidable opponent.
Yeah, definitely a talent for sure. Brian, I'll go back to you and talk about this backcourt a little bit. It's a interesting backcourt by committee you have with North Carolina. Obviously, Seth Trimble missed some time earlier in the season with his injuries, but come back and played well. You have guys like Derek Dixon who are emerging, but there hasn't been like a go-to guy, I guess I would say. But talk about this backcourt a little bit. What are some of their strengths, weaknesses, and yeah, what have you seen from them of late?
I think you said it best. I think the biggest weakness is they don't have a go-to guy, at least on the offensive end. They don't really have a guy that can get their own shot at will, kind of create off the perimeter. I think they're finally starting to solidify it though. At the beginning of the year, it's kind of been a revolving door of who's in, who's out. Transfer Kyle Evans has not lived up to expectations at all, but I think they found something in first year Derek Dixon. He's kind of solidified himself as the lead guard. Good passer, really good shooter. I think that's the one thing with Dixon. He's outside of Asar, he's the only consistent shooter on the team. Really, he's the only person in the backcourt that has really shown he can kind of shoot it from three. I think Seth is obviously a 4-year player. I think he's really good. I don't know if the defense has necessarily been there with Seth as it has the previous 3 years. I know he has a reputation of kind of being that lockdown guy. I haven't seen it quite yet this year. But I think Seth is like he's very consistent. He'll give you kind of 13 to 15 points. He'll give you solid defense. He'll struggle from beyond the arc. And his offensive game hasn't necessarily evolved. Kind of how you would, I guess, hope or want. And then I think one thing is Luka Bogovac has really come on as of late. I think you're starting to see a little bit of what maybe UNC was looking for when they recruited him, kind of that 3-point shooting, a little bit off the dribble stuff that you haven't seen with any of like other UNC's guards. So I think Luka could be a guy that he could kind of catch fire from beyond the arc, kind of create his own shot. But yeah, I think UNC's backcourt has definitely been a little bit of struggle, kind of on both ends this year.
Yeah, Matthew. To close it out, we mentioned a lot of players here. If you had to pick one that's maybe not Caleb Wilson, you think needs to have a big game for North Carolina to come out on top on Saturday, who would that be and why?
Oh, I honestly I might go with Luka Bogovac. I think if he's confident in his shot and confident just on the floor in general, whether it's on the defensive side of the ball or just confident driving in the lane, a lot of the times he's kind of driven in the lane and just looked lost. But the past few games he's emerged. I would expect him to go back into the starting lineup. I'd kind of be surprised if he didn't. I think Jaden Young will move back to the bench where he probably should be. Not any nothing against Jaden, but I think Luka right now is playing better. I mean, Jaden started the other day and played 10 minutes against Georgia Tech. So I think Luka could be the X factor if he can find that outside shot and really provide an offensive spark that North Carolina needs. Obviously, Wilson was the easy answer there, but
Yeah, and looking into this matchup, it's interesting because I feel like it's a pretty solid matchup for North Carolina in the sense that both teams have strengths in the front court. But on offense, at least, a backcourt that has been inconsistent. Both teams are similar in that aspect. I feel like the one advantage has been Duke's consistent defense throughout the year. But I'll ask all three of you guys this question. Matthew, I'll start with you. Just keys, if you had to pick one or two keys for UNC to win this game, whether that's a stat, whether that's you mentioned already a player, but a point of emphasis or something like that you think, okay, if UNC can do this, they'll have a good chance to knock off the Blue Devils at home. What would it be?
I think the first thing I'd say is defend beyond the arc.
Yeah.
That's been the obvious for Carolina that if they can defend beyond the arc and limit the 3-point percentages of being in the high 50s against opponents, then they've got a bit of an advantage maybe. But that it's really killer whenever you're letting a team shoot 57% from three on 25 attempts. It's like, well, yeah, you're going to be playing from behind. And I think another one is getting out in transition. We've seen it a little bit more recently. I think the UVA game was really, really big, especially with Jaren. A lot of quick transition off a UVA miss, just getting out, getting down the floor fast, getting easy points. I think that'll be another big thing, just because both of these teams are pretty high scoring. So Carolina's going to have to be able to keep up with Duke in that sense. So getting out in transition and scoring fast, what I would go with.
Yeah. Beckett, we'll come to you.
I think something that supports that transition offense is rebounding. There were some times earlier in the year when their defensive rebounding was not there at all, and luckily it was against teams that couldn't really shoot, so it wasn't detrimental at all. But yeah, I mean, you can't get out in transition if you don't have the ball, and obviously giving Duke second chances is you're not going to win the game if you do that. So, and also turnovers kind of in that same vein. I think they've done a really good job of limiting turnovers. I think they had like 4 the other day against, I guess that was Virginia, or maybe it was the game before, but that's something they've also recovered well from early in the season. So I think if they can carry over that success into the Duke game, they'll have a good chance.
All right, Brian.
I guess I'll go back to it. I think the number one thing is ball screen defense, especially with that front court. I think kind of limiting Boozer, you're not going to stop him, obviously, but I think doing something, be engaged defensively, and then I will go into. I think Henry Basar has to have a big game. I think he's North Carolina's most important and most valuable player. I think when Henry Basar is engaged both offensively and defensively, you're getting him in consistent pick and roll situations where he's kind of rolling to the rim and he's being able to shoot that three ball consistently. I think it's like 45% this year. I think North Carolina's ceiling is really high. So I think making sure Basar is both engaged offensively and defensively will be very important.
All right, guys, bring us home. Let's get a score prediction from each of you for the game on Saturday.
I think I went with, in our editor's predictions, I think I went with Duke 87, UNC 82. I think Duke comes out on top, but I think it's a close game.
There you go. Beckett, you can go.
Yeah, Beckett, go ahead.
I think I said 79-75 UNC, but I also think they'll be really close, and it's kind of anyone's game.
I went, I think 85-83 Duke. I think Duke's top 3 team in the country. I think they'll be too good, but I will say I think they split and UNC gets the one in March.
Wow, and Cameron. All right, well, good stuff. So that game, like we mentioned, Saturday, February 7th at 6:30 p.m. over in Chapel Hill. Well, before we go, a couple quick things. One thing of note is before the game on Thursday, we're going to have our joint print edition out between the Chronicle and Daily Tar Heels staff. We've been working hard on it, both sides. It's a great thing that we do every year, and in this tradition that we have with our Rivalry Challenge, where both schools fundraise to support student journalism, 2 of the best papers in the country. If you want to donate, visit either dukechronicle.com or dailytarheel.com. There's a button in the top right, and you can donate to either school, preferably the Chronicle, but you can donate to the Daily Tar Heel if you want to. Guys, can you just talk a little bit about the Rivalry Challenge, what it means to you guys, and a little bit a preview of what's going to be in the print edition on your side of things?
Yeah, I would say that the Rivalry Challenge, I think for both of us, is one of the most important papers of the year. I know at least that's kind of the feeling over at the Daily Tar Heel, that it means that we're able to support student journalism and student independence. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that we're editorially independent from the school. And this Rivalry Challenge over the past, I guess, 8 years now, this is the 8th year, has really helped to support the Daily Tar Heel and the Chronicle stay, as a voice on campus. And I think it's really important to have that. And we're looking to even the score with you guys. You guys are up 4-3, I think, in the Rivalry Challenge. So we're looking to match that. So
yeah, and if you click that button, you can see a list of stories from both sides about the rivalry. There's some great content across the board about some history stuff, some current stuff. And yeah, like Matthew mentioned, this is super important for independence and student journalism. So pick up your print edition on either campus on Thursday throughout the game and donate because, yeah, a lot of great content across the board, and we really, really appreciate that. Matthew, Beckett, Brian, amazing stuff as always. Thank you guys so much for coming on. We really enjoyed it and hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you guys for having us. We appreciate it.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, great stuff there from the trio from the Daily Tar Heel. We always appreciate that. You'll notice we changed clothes. It's because this was a different day from our first recording. We did one day after. So, yeah, I think they nailed it on the head about the matchup between these two teams. It's interesting. It seems like they have similar struggles, similar inconsistencies, similar strengths. And to me, I just see... I see this being a pretty close game between two teams that match up well. It's interesting because I don't think Duke has played a team, Virginia Tech kind of, where since Michigan State that the strength has kind of been in the front court. It seems like a lot of the good teams that Duke has faced recently, Louisville, FSU's been close, SMU, some others, and even Texas Tech with an injured front court. It seems like the strength have been in the guards. So I'm curious to see at this point in the season how a team with the strength in the front court matches up with Duke and defends Duke, because we've talked about the struggles with Boozer and Gungba on defense. It seems like North Carolina's having their own struggle. So interesting there. But what are your thoughts on this game and maybe a pick from you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's gonna be really interesting with Wilson and Vassar against Boozer and Pat. Obviously, Wilson's not a shooter really at all, but Vassar really is. I'm interested to see how they decide to guard that if Duke decides to deploy Dame Sar on Caleb Wilson at times, even though I don't know who Cam would guard at that point, Luka maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be obviously a really close game. I think Brian's point about the ball screen defense is something that really I'm sure Coach Shire is taking notice of, and it's something he's trying to scheme for. I think that means you're going to need an improved performance from Isaiah Evans beyond the arc. If they're going to give up open shots and drop underneath, he's going to have to hit those shots on the road. I think it's going to be tough. Pick wise, I really don't know. I've been wrestling. I haven't decided yet. I want to lean UNC. I think Duke's. It's been a while since Duke lost. So the rivalry. Carolina's a much improved team from last year. I think Wilson, first game in the rivalry is gonna have a big night. So I'll go North Carolina, 76-72 in the Dean Dome.
Yeah, as always, we tend to have very similar ideas. I think Caleb Foster is going to be the X factor for Duke based on Brian's analysis and what we've been talking about, because he's been the one consistent, like Cam Boozer too, but interestingly, 3-point shooter, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. and as good as Isaiah Evans is at shooting, and as good at times as some other players have been, I mean, Caleb Foster's been pretty consistent, and he's going to be the one orchestrating that offense. He's going to be the one who's coming off screens, who's attacking, who's making decisions. So if he has a big game, I think Duke can win. Also, the size is interesting because Duke is normally a few inches bigger than every other team they play. And if North Carolina goes with the Stevenson, Visar, Wilson lineup, they're bigger than Duke in that lineup, right? So curious to see who they put where. But that's a big lineup. And Derek Dixon at 6'5", and Seth Trimble's not a big guy, but he plays big. So 100%. It'll be interesting. I also give a slight edge to UNC. I think it's going to be like relatively high scoring, maybe in this sense. I think initially teams will be a little bit nervous, feeling each other out. But I've been impressed with Duke's defense, even against the best teams. But 100%. I don't know. I think North Carolina might hit a few threes, something like you said, I don't know, like a 74-72 type of vibe. I think it might be really close in Chapel Hill. But slight edge towards North Carolina right now. But like I mentioned, I think Caleb Foster could be the difference maker.
Yeah, I guess a couple other things just to add on to what was some things that weren't mentioned, I guess, on Duke's end. I think you mentioned Duke hasn't played a team with a dominant front court in a while. I think the rebounding margin is going to be huge down there with Vassar and Wilson. Wilson, obviously, I mentioned, is averaging a double-double, and Vassar is obviously huge and a great rebounder. So I think Duke's done a really good job recently of getting on the glass for second chance points. I don't think those opportunities will be there as frequently against North Carolina. So I think that's definitely a place to watch. Duke's going to have to convert their shots on the first chance more often if they're going to have a chance. And then they mentioned the pace of play, the fast break points. Duke's done a above average job on the break, but I wouldn't say they've played any teams that really want to get out and run. So I'm interested to see how they handle that against North Carolina. Obviously, North Carolina's going to want to push the pace, and they don't want to let Duke get settled in the half court with how good the defense has been this year. So just interested to see kind of how the game flow plays out if Shire decides to, try to get out and run as well against North Carolina. But yeah, we'll see. I think it'll be a really fun game. And yeah, that's a great print coming out too. So talk about that.
Yeah, one quick stat of note too that I found interesting. I don't want to chalk everything up to 3-point shooting, but that's so much of basketball nowadays. And Duke and North Carolina are practically similar in 3-point shooting, 34% from Duke, 34.1% for North Carolina. Not great to say the least. But the difference is on defense, North Carolina is allowing teams to shoot 34, which is about what Duke is at, but Duke is at defending 31% from behind the arc, especially, and you saw that against Louisville, one of the best 3-point shooting teams, or I guess highest volume 3-point shooting teams in the country, the highest volume. Duke shut it down pretty well because of the defensive pressure, the ball pressure from the guards. And the DTH staff was mentioning that they don't really have a primary ball handler, a playmaker, I guess I should say, on the guards. So I think Duke's going to put a lot of pressure on North Carolina's guards and make Visar and Wilson, handle the ball a lot more than they're probably comfortable with. So we'll see what happens there, but it should be fun.
Yeah, I think on the flip side of that, I'm looking at CVB analytics here. I think you mentioned the Louisville game. I think the flip side of that game is like you look at Texas Tech or Florida State.
Yeah,
Duke's going to live with letting teams get shots off from three. and they're in the 12th percentile in 3-point attempts per game. So if North Carolina starts hitting them at home with a huge crowd, you let Vassar, Luka see a couple go in, it could be a long night because they're gonna let North Carolina shoot. So I think it definitely is something to watch there, just the output and the volume and how they defend it.
Yeah, for sure. It will be an exciting game. I'll be there. And like we mentioned, our print edition is out Thursday. We have great content. Caleb, you wrote about.
Yeah, so I wrote about, obviously, I think Boozer and Wilson was the big story this week. And so I just went back and looked at some of the best freshman performances over the last, 26 years since 2000 of the rivalry. Put together a little top 10 or so. Kept it fair, five for each school. We have great stories about, the Duke band. We have about the ushers at the games, the line monitors, Duke students' favorite organization or group, I would say.
Sure.
Davis Beischer, who's the director of basketball operations for the Blue Devils. You wrote a great sidebar column-esque thing after Louisville as well. That's already out. Make sure you read that about, the growth of, Duke's freshman class, especially Nick Hymenia and Dame Sarr here. We had some great analytics stuff. Don Fanolio talked to, two, how would you call it, legends of the sports analytics game, Ken Pomeroy and Evan Mia, two of the, go-to sources for analytics. And our Lucy Glenn also looked at CVB analytics and some of the trends for Duke. So it's a really cool print. I think, it's always, I hope you pick it up, go read it. Make sure you donate to either us or Daily Tar Heel or both. But make sure us probably first and foremost.
I did forget to mention, if you donate $100 to the Chronicle, you will be entered for a chance to win 2 tickets to the Duke versus UNC game in March in Cameron Indoor. If you donate $250, you'll get 2 entries into possibly winning those 2 tickets. So a lot is at stake. Those tickets are worth a lot more than $100, I presume. So worth the deal there if you put your money in, and we really appreciate that. Right now, we are at a live, let's see. Oh, the Chronicle just had a big donation. So now the Chronicle is up by roughly $6,000. But it's going to go back and forth for the next 5 days. And we have some fun videos.
I was going to say, we have some cool Duke-affiliated people that are going to make some videos. Make sure you check it out on social media. We had the basketball game this week. We won't talk about that anymore.
Oh, we're going to talk to them about that.
So make sure you donate. It ends. Tell everybody when it ends.
It ends at tip-off on the game. So tip-off on Saturday.
Make sure you get them in. If you have to donate at 6:15 at the buzzer, so be it, right? So just make sure you pick up print around campus. And, we're looking forward to it. Should be really fun. Hopefully it won't snow in again this week. We'll get travel to Chapel Hill and a nice sunny game day for everybody.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. I know we've been long episode. We've been off for a couple weeks, but we'll be back this weekend and recap everything from this game and preview some spring sports. Yeah. Until then, have a good day, have a good week, and take care of yourself. Enjoy some college sports. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been Blue Devil Beat.